We bring in Congressman Scott Perry this morning from the 4th Congressional. Good morning there, Congressman. How are you?
I'm well, Gary. How are you? Good to hear your voice.
I am better than I was last week, so I'm a little tired, but we'll get it going here. I got to work out like you do. You have a good workout, right?
I used to, but this job keep doing that. I can't blame it's myself. I just got to be more diligent. We all do.
Well, you and I can do this together now, okay? We'll get it done together. I'll call you every day. You call me every day. Get me up, and I'll go run at the same time you're doing or whatever. I don't run anymore. I do walking and all that kind of stuff. I'd love to work in a swimming pool. That's one of the places I'd love to work in a swimming pool because you get a good workout there, but, less stress in the knees and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right. As long as you're doing something. I think that's the point, especially as you get older. It's a little tougher, but you got it. It's more important.
Yeah. Hey, you had a little verbal scuffle there with the New York Daily Record last week. Tell us about what happened.
Well, listen, we're having the town hall meetings, and, everybody has their opinion on them, and that's fine. And, but the papers, they've got they're reporting, which is their job, and we appreciate it. Let me say this too: I appreciate them printing my input because, of course, they don't have to,
right?
And so I do want to thank them for that and their professionalism in that regard. But when they take shots, I just wanted to be factual, and sometimes to me they're fairly misleading, and a lot of times you think, well, all you're going to do is kind of poke the hornet's nest or something like that by saying something, but at the same time, you get tired of just just taking it over and over and over again. And I think it's important to respond and just at least set the record straight from your side of the equation. That's all we're doing.
What were the things that set you off last week? For people who didn't get a chance to read the article or read your response in the paper yesterday, what were some of the things that set you off?
Well, one of the things that set me off is this the conglomeration of things that I've said over the course of a few years as a public official, and then kind of pointing to Scott Perry, is somewhat radical or off the rails or something like that. And out of context, I imagine every single person could be viewed in that regard. And that's the point: is we wanted to put everything in context. Number one, number two, they're the folks that make their money with print and with people that read. So when I kind of paraphrase a quote from literature, you would think if anybody would get it, they would.
Right.
And, when they don't, and then they kind of mislead the people and say something very irresponsible and then tie it to me, I take significant homage with that. Just the way they report some things. I mean, you talk about the Farm Bill, and the reporter said, why did you vote against it? And I gave them a fair amount of reasons. I started out with paying millionaire farmers millions of dollars in taxpayer
corporate welfare.
Yeah. But of course, the paper doesn't mention that at all. They only stick to the food stamp side, and then it appears that you're against poor people or something like that, and that it's not the case. So I just want them to be balanced with their print the whole thing. If you're going to ask me the question, print the entire answer, not just the portion that fits your political agenda.
Well, the paper can tend to get a little full of itself. I guess we all can from time to time. But,
sure.
And they have they have a little bit more of an agenda, I think, because of the fact that they also are going to endorse candidates later on, which I always thought, I don't know how you feel about it. I always hate when people come out and endorse. I mean, what does that say? I mean, what the New York Daily Record endorses? What does that mean? Everybody else is supposed to follow along because the New York Daily Record said to endorse. I never endorse anybody.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I think when you are a purveyor of information, when your job is to inform, and you're supposed to be seen as balanced, fair, unbiased, then endorsing kind of blows that credibility for you. Whether it's right or wrong, it might be the right thing to endorse a certain person, but that's not your job. Your job is to inform, and so let the parties do that or something like that, because they have a particular bent. They're not seen as unbiased and nonpartisan. They are particularly partisan. So there's a time and a place for it. But I think that people like you and the newspapers, that their job is to inform us of the facts. When they endorse, they kind of reduce their own credibility.
I agree with you totally, and I think the endorsement process comes from the people who I trust implicitly to eventually make the right decision if they decide to listen in and watch and read and do all the things that they should do as citizen activists to be, involved in who it is that's going to represent them out there.
Absolutely, and sometimes we're happy, and sometimes we're disappointed. In particular, I think that we made a bad choice in reelecting the president, but at the time the people didn't. But we respect their opinion. That's the point. We respect their opinion. It's the people's opinion that matters, not all these other naysayers that are trying to tell us the way it is based on their small view of the issue or the person.
Susan Rice came out yesterday, and I wanted to get because you've been in the military, I guess you still are in the
Sure.
Service, right? And again, thank you, as we always thank every service person here. But yesterday, Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor, obviously most famous for coming out the 5 times and saying, well, this whole thing in Benghazi at the attack on our consulate was caused by basically an uprising because of the film some guy made here in the United States about Islam. Well, obviously that wasn't true. So yesterday, David Gregory comes out and says, when you were last here, Ambassador Rice, it was an eventful morning on the story of Benghazi and the horrible attack on our compound there. We haven't seen you in a while. As you look back at your involvement in all that, do you have any regrets? And Susan Rice, who's now the National Security Advisor, comes out and says, David, no. Because what I said to you that morning and what I did every day since was to share the best information that we had at the time. The information I provided, which I explained to you, was that we had at the moment. It could change. I commented that was based on what we knew on that morning was provided to me and my colleagues and indeed to Congress by the intelligence community, and that's been well validated in many different ways since. And that information turned out in some respects not to be 100% correct. But the notion that somehow I or anybody else in the administration misled the American people is patently false, and I think that's been amply demonstrated. With a lot of the information we've been finding out lately about what was passed on to the president in real time while this was actually happening, and our leaders there, from Panetta to some of the generals and so forth who were involved there, saying, no, this is not some kind of demonstration. This is a terrorist attack. Her words even ring more hollow now than they did before, don't they?
Yeah, I got to tell you, doubling down on misleading your citizens, your friends, your neighbors, your family doesn't make it any better. I think that, by her saying that, really makes people question and, again, undermines her credibility, the administration's credibility, the former secretary's credibility, because we all know that the information was available at the time and certainly within hours after the time she had started making those remarks. And to say that at this point, that when all of America knows it, that she doesn't have any regrets about misleading the American people, I just, here, this is the seminal question, not only for her, but for former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Are you incompetent or ignorant? Because in this regard, you're one of the other, and that's why it does matter. The American people want to know which one you are, because you are in positions of authority and positions to protect the American people. And if you're either one of those things, it's important for us when we make choices and when we listen to the things you say, how much stock we put in them.
You're exactly right. And I think that's the point, that if we had closure to it, there'd be no need for her to come out and say anything again. We don't have closure to it. The idea that, well, things changed along the way. Yeah, things changed before you ever got on the mic that day. And it really bothers us that you didn't come out and speak the truth. And everybody says, well, you shouldn't pick on her. She didn't know anything. Then why are you sending her out there? Why wasn't Hillary Clinton out there? Why wasn't somebody else out there that was more of a position of responsibility when that was coming down and people were killed?
Look, we know that. We also know that Hillary Clinton sent her out there, sent Susan Rice out. She was a scapegoat, so that's unfortunate for her in this regard. But at this point, it's time to acknowledge what happened, which I think this was election year politics. They didn't want the bad news of terrorism, the rise of al-Qaeda. This was a planned and coordinated attack. It was just not the narrative that they wanted to hear. They misled us. The election's behind us at this point.
Right.
The best thing to do is just to say what happened and move on, ask for forgiveness, but move on. But don't continue to double down on misleading us.
Yeah, you're never going to hear, I don't think, an asking for forgiveness from this particular group. Got a call for you this morning, Congressman.
Sure.
Paul, and by the way, you're welcome to call, too, at 1-800-357-0910. Paul in York, you want to be on with Congressman Scott Perry? Go ahead, Paul. It's your turn to make the call.
Hey, good morning, Gary. Good morning, Scott. How you doing?
Hey, Paul, good to hear you.
Hey, speaking of, manipulating information, I hate to beat a dead horse, but the low information voter in this area, this country, this part, just, they're not getting the correct information, or they're getting their source of information from the liberal media, and that's all they listen to. And I think it's up to us as informed news people or people who listen to the truth to spread the word of what's going on. And it's really scary, it's tough right now to try and get people to understand what's going on because all they do is get their information from the media, you know?
Paul,
well, I think the upside,
thanks, Paul.
I think it's a great point to make. The upside in this age of technology where everybody's got a smartphone is that surveys are showing that people more and more are disbelieving and not trusting national media outlets. And what they are trusting is their neighbors and the people they know, and they're corresponding over social media, Facebook, whatever. Now, I'm not saying that's the where-all, be-all of it, but it does provide a great opportunity for citizens like you who are engaged, who are informed, to inform your neighbors about the other side of the story. And that's very powerful, and that, I think, is, that's a bright spot in this whole age of technology, social media, and being disconnected personally, but the information is available and can be put out on a mass basis by one individual.
One of the important things, too, and I've heard someone call one time and said, I listen to you, and that's where I get my news. I said, don't do that. Don't do that. I said, that's not what you should do. I said, listen to everything. Listen to that with which you think sounds a little different. You may disagree, and then go do your due diligence and trying to find out what are the numbers, what are the actual things that are happening, and you can dig and you can find those things, but don't just rely on one place to get your news. Like I said, I love the fact people listen to WSBA, and that's great, but I want them also to be able to look at other places and read other things and listen to other things and watch other things, and then make up their own minds based on what they see, and I believe that will eventually lead them to the truth.
Absolutely, and even I, of course, it's easy for me to watch the news outlets that agree with me, but that's not really instructional. It's that's like driving around the cul-de-sac of ideas. So it's important, and I listen to the other talkers and the other media outlets to hear what they're saying, because it's another perspective, and the perspective. It's important to have that, because there are a lot of people that identify and agree with that, and you have to know, if you're going to be a good representative, you have to represent all sides of the equation.
When we come back, Scott, I want to talk a little more to some of our callers. D.W. in Manchester is going to talk to you and give you a call and ask you something. We'll find out what it is. Congressman Scott Perry with us. We got 3 lines open. Grab them right now. We'll have a chance to get your questions in when we come back with Congressman Scott Perry, 1-800-357-0910. This is the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA with Congressman Scott Perry this morning. We've got 3 calls to get in. We've got about 30 seconds a caller, so let's get to it. D.W. in Manchester, you're first up with Congressman Perry. Go ahead, D.W.
Hey, D.W.
How can we get good morning, Scott. Thank you very much for your service and also your representation. And, Gary, I'm glad to hear your voice again.
Thank you.
Now, I lost my train of thought here. How do we get John Boehner to appoint a special prosecutor or whatever?
For Benghazi?
Benghazi, yes.
Yeah,
Thanks, TW.
There's a fair amount of pressure on that thing, and I think he wants to, with all due respect, and I've signed on to onto the bill because I too am frustrated. I suppose he wants to take it as far as he can under normal circumstances, and just to make sure everybody understands, the special counsel starts out with members of Congress like me on it, and then we would appoint this person. I guess. I hate to say it, but I think he's trying to save some money, which is probably not the best reason to do what he's doing. But I think he wants to let it run its course as far as we can take it under the normal process, and then go from there. But just remember this as well: we will need concurrence from the Senate on this, and I suspect the bigger issue is that the Senate will not concur, and he already knows that.
Let's go to Jim in New York. Jim, you're next up. You're on with Congressman Scott Perry. Go ahead, Jim. You're trying to make the call.
Good morning.
Morning, Jim.
There's a lot of things going on in the world. Let me say, first of all, we're not the world's policemen. However, if I see someone out in their yard beating their child and the other children running, I'm going to do something.
Sure.
What is your position on Syria? I think Syria is the worst thing going on in the world, and I think we ought to try to get our Great Britain, France, and do something about Assad. It's just terrible.
Thank you, Jim.
Syria is one of the worst. We have numerous ones, and unfortunately, this is a little bit of hindsight, but I was calling for the United States to do something when I was first elected, because there was a window of opportunity where we had some allies operating over there, some Western-friendly folks working against Assad. Unfortunately, in my opinion, that window has now closed and is really slammed tightly shut with Russia in the lead on the operation. They will not agree with us in anything that we offer in the UN, and all they're doing is really shoring up their power power in that region, which they've been taken out of for about 50 years. So, unfortunately, right now our options are just so limited. We are going to have to deal with Russia because we handed them the keys to that operation, and they're going to do what they see fit. And that's what you get when you don't take the lead early on and stand for something.
And when you don't follow through at the end and saying what you stand for in terms of red lines and everything else. And,
well, absolutely.
And obviously, I think Jim makes a good point. For humanitarian reasons, we ought to be stepping in and helping people. But I think that's kind of fading too in a lot of people's thoughts. Let's get Bill in Shiloh, our final caller. Bill, about 30 seconds with you. Go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Hi, Bill.
And thanks for your service, Scott. Hey, heard a report over the weekend with regards to this business about what happened in Southern California and the electric substation, and I heard that there was some sort of legislation called the SHIELD law that was supposed to protect large transmission equipment and so forth, and I was wondering whether that is ever going to come out of committee and what your feelings are with regards to protection of our electric grid.
Okay,
Thanks,
so let
Bill.
me just explain to the listeners what that is. It's regarding the electromagnetic pulse, which it can either occur via a nuclear attack or just an EMP device, and it's one of the things that terrorists are looking at very particularly because it would destroy our electrical systems across the board. Anything in your house, anything in society that runs off electricity within the purview of this weapon would be destroyed. And I don't mean
about 30
disabled
seconds.
just temporarily. I mean destroyed. The SHIELD Act,
right,
offered by Trent Franks from Arizona, would harden our electricity grid, and we are going to have a hearing, I think, on it and on the subject this week in Homeland Security in Washington D.C. The question is how, as always, is how to pay for it, and that's where I'm going to be looking at trying to repatriate some funds from overseas, some profits from overseas.
And we'll have to put that under to be continued, Congressman. We appreciate you being with us this morning. Thank you so much. I'll call you tomorrow morning. We'll get working out together. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Scott. Take care. Appreciate it.